She's my friend's mom, and every time we're alone, the tension between us grows. What if someone finds out? The first time I really noticed her, I didn't even realize it at the moment. It was an ordinary afternoon. My friend had invited me over to help with some moving boxes, and I was barely paying attention to anything beyond the weight of the packages in my hands. But then she appeared in the doorway, and somehow, the mundane quiet of that afternoon shifted. She moved with a kind of effortless grace that made everything around her seem slower, more deliberate. The sunlight from the kitchen window fell over her hair in a soft halo, and the faint scent of her perfume, floral, warm, comforting, reached me even before I fully registered it. She had that way of commanding attention without demanding it. There was a subtle confidence in her posture, the gentle tilt of her head, and the quiet rhythm of her movements as she arranged a vase of flowers on the table. Our eyes met for just a brief second, and it was like the air between us changed. I felt my heart skip in a way I hadn't expected, a strange mix of admiration and something else I couldn't name yet. Her smile was brief, almost shy, but it carried warmth, like sunlight brushing against skin after a long winter. I tried to focus on the boxes, on the mundane task, but my hands felt heavier, my thoughts lighter, drifting entirely toward her presence. She spoke softly, asking if I needed help with anything, and even the sound of her voice was different somehow, calm, measured, yet full of a kind of quiet energy that made me pay attention to every syllable. My mind noticed the subtle movements of her hands, the way she tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear, the way her eyes lingered on mine for just a moment longer than usual. It was a small gesture, almost insignificant to anyone else, but to me, it felt electric. There was no overt flirting, no declarations of feelings, just a simple, fleeting connection that left a subtle ache in my chest. I found myself wanting to prolong the moment, to find a reason to stay, to hear the cadence of her laughter, to notice the tiny details of her expressions. Even as I walked out later that afternoon, I could still feel the imprint of her presence, her perfume, the warmth of her gaze, the delicate weight of a smile that had reached just the edges of my soul. That brief encounter planted the seed of something I couldn't yet define. It was curiosity, certainly, but it was also a quiet fascination that hummed beneath the surface of everything else that day. And somewhere deep down, I knew that this was only the beginning, that the ordinary moments of life were about to be colored by her presence in ways I hadn't imagined. After that first afternoon, something in the air between us subtly shifted. It wasn't dramatic, nothing that anyone else would notice, but to me, it was palpable. I found myself paying attention to the smallest interactions, the briefest encounters that, under normal circumstances, I might have overlooked entirely. It started with casual, everyday moments, helping her carry groceries from the car to the kitchen, accidentally brushing past her as we both reached for the same book on a shelf, or exchanging a few jokes about the mundane chaos of life. Each interaction was fleeting, almost incidental, but the weight behind them was anything but ordinary. There was a rhythm forming, a quiet, unspoken connection that neither of us directly acknowledged, yet both of us felt. I remember the day she handed me a basket of fresh fruit. Her fingers brushed mine for just a moment, quick, almost unnoticeable, but I felt a spark. It wasn't a flame, not yet, but a warmth that traveled along my arm, settling somewhere deep in my chest. The brief contact lingered in my mind long after the moment had passed. I caught myself remembering the curve of her smile, the way her eyes crinkled when she laughed softly at a joke I hadn't even realized I had made. Even in the simplest gestures, there was a tenderness that tugged at me. I noticed the texture of her sweater as I helped her adjust it when she bent over to reach a low shelf. I noticed the subtle scent of her perfume mingling with the faint aroma of the apples she had just washed. And when she laughed, a quiet, melodic laugh that felt like it belonged only to this small, sunlit kitchen, I found my own smile spreading without thought. There was also the tension, the delicate dance of closeness and restraint. Eye contact that lingered a heartbeat too long, casual touches that left both of us acutely aware, and fleeting moments of silence that spoke volumes. Each encounter was a balancing act, thrilling yet safe, intimate yet respectful. There was an electric undercurrent, a feeling that we were both testing boundaries without ever crossing them. What fascinated me most wasn't just her presence, but the way she made the ordinary feel extraordinary. Even the briefest conversation, the smallest shared laugh, carried a resonance that stayed with me long after she had walked away. These tiny moments accumulated, weaving a subtle, compelling tension between us. I found myself looking forward to them, not for any dramatic revelation, but simply for the chance to exist in that space beside her, where life's ordinary rhythms suddenly felt charged, vibrant, and alive. In these small, quiet moments, the first threads of something deeper were being woven, a connection built on unspoken understanding, shared presence, and the unacknowledged thrill of closeness that neither of us dared name aloud. By now, the quiet, fleeting encounters had started to settle into my mind in ways I couldn't ignore. It wasn't just that I noticed her anymore, it was that my thoughts seemed to orbit around her, lingering on the smallest details, replaying moments in vivid clarity. Each brush of her hand, each fleeting glance, had become a kind of private language, one only I understood. I found myself thinking about her in moments when I should have been focused elsewhere, walking home, sitting in my room, even during classes. I would catch myself remembering the warmth of her hand grazing mine, the soft inflection of her voice when she spoke my name, the delicate tilt of her head when she laughed. It was intoxicating in a subtle, almost dangerous way, like holding on to a secret flame that burned quietly but persistently. At the same time, there was a conflict gnawing at me. I knew the reality of our situation, the age difference, the social boundaries, the fact that she was my friend's mother. Rationally, I told myself these feelings were improper, fleeting curiosities that would fade if I ignored them. But emotionally, it was impossible to dismiss the way my chest tightened when I imagined her smile, or the way my pulse quickened whenever I felt her presence near me. I noticed her small vulnerabilities more clearly than before. A fleeting sigh while she washed the dishes, a faraway look when she seemed lost in thought, the way her eyes softened when she caught me staring, subtly catching me in the act. These details weren't just attractive, they were human, delicate, and profoundly relatable. They made her feel real, approachable, and achingly close, even when we were technically worlds apart. The tension wasn't external, it lived inside me. Every time I replayed our encounters in my mind, I felt a strange combination of longing and restraint. I longed to reach out, to say something that bridged the distance between us, but restraint anchored me. I had to respect the line, even if it felt invisible, even if it throbbed in the quiet spaces of my imagination. And yet, there was a thrill in that restraint. The knowledge that my feelings were mine alone, quietly observed, privately nurtured, made every smile, every brush of her hand, every fleeting gaze feel monumental. The ordinary world suddenly had texture, her presence colored it with warmth, subtle tension, and the delicious ache of unspoken connection. In these internal moments, I realized the story wasn't about acting on impulse. It was about recognizing the depth of a feeling, quiet, unacknowledged, and impossible to ignore, and understanding that sometimes, the most profound intimacy begins in the private theater of the mind. It started with a conversation that seemed ordinary at first, but quickly became something much more significant. We were sitting in the living room, the soft hum of the evening settling around us like a gentle blanket. A cup of tea steamed quietly on the table between us, and the fading sunlight cast a warm, golden glow across her features. She spoke about something mundane at first, a memory from her childhood, a recent challenge at work, but as she spoke, I realized I was hanging on every word, not just listening, but truly absorbing her thoughts, her pauses, the subtle ways she expressed herself. She had a way of speaking that was both confident and inviting, like she was opening a door to a part of herself that few ever saw. I noticed the slight lift of her eyebrows when she was amused, the delicate tension in her shoulders when she was recalling something difficult, and the soft exhale she let out when she finished a thought, as if releasing a burden I couldn't see. It was mesmerizing, not just because of who she was, but because of the trust she was extending, even in such small gestures. I responded as carefully as I could, choosing my words with an unspoken awareness that this conversation mattered far more than either of us could admit. My gaze met hers occasionally, and I noticed the subtle flicker of connection in her eyes, the way her pupils seemed to dilate, the slight pause before she smiled. At one point, our hands brushed as I handed her a folded napkin, and the touch lingered a fraction longer than necessary, both of us fully aware of it. There was no rush, no expectation, only the quiet thrill of proximity and the unspoken acknowledgement of a bond forming in real time. Laughter flowed naturally between us, soft and unforced, filling the quiet spaces of the room without breaking the intimacy. I realized I was beginning to understand her in ways that went beyond surface-level attraction. I was noticing her fears, her hopes, the subtle ways she carried herself, and in doing so, she was noticing me too, not as a boy or a friend, but as someone who genuinely mattered in that moment. By the time the conversation wound down, there was a lingering warmth in the air, a sense of closeness that neither words nor gestures could fully capture. Sitting there, so near to her, I felt the delicate balance of trust and restraint, of desire and respect. Her presence was calming and thrilling at the same time, and for the first time, I realized that emotional intimacy could be just as powerful, if not more so, than any outward expression of affection. In that quiet evening, the unspoken connection between us deepened, laying the foundation for something that was as delicate as it was undeniable. We were learning each other's rhythms, discovering the unspoken language of gestures, glances, and pauses that made every ordinary moment extraordinary. The thrill of closeness was tempered by a sudden, undeniable awareness of reality. One afternoon, as we lingered in the living room after a shared cup of tea, she turned toward me with a playful, cautious smile and asked, "What if someone finds out?" Her words were casual, almost teasing, but the undercurrent of seriousness struck me immediately. I felt my pulse quicken, a mix of excitement and apprehension coursing through me. I could see the careful consideration in her eyes, a flicker of hesitation, of concern, of awareness that the world outside our little bubble might not understand. And yet, there was that quiet warmth, that almost imperceptible curve of her lips that made it clear she valued our connection even as she acknowledged the risk. I hesitated, searching for the right words. There was no easy answer, no simple reassurance that could erase the tension of reality. I finally replied, softly, almost instinctively, "They'll only be jealous." The words felt bold in the quiet room, yet there was a hint of humor behind them, a gentle way of acknowledging the danger without denying the delight of our shared closeness. Even as I spoke, I noticed the subtle shifts in her body language. Her hand brushed against mine when she reached for her cup, lingering just a fraction longer than necessary. Her shoulders relaxed slightly, the tension easing as if she appreciated the balance of honesty and lightheartedness in my response. The sunlight spilling through the window caught in her hair, casting a warm halo that made her presence feel both safe and intoxicating. There was a delicate tension in that moment, an awareness of boundaries, of social expectations, and of the unspoken rules we were tiptoeing around. Yet underneath it all, there was an undeniable thrill, a silent acknowledgement that our connection was rare, precious, and exhilarating precisely because it had to be guarded. Every glance, every pause, every brush of skin carried a weight far beyond its physicality. I realized then that this tension was not something to fear but something to honor. It heightened the intimacy, made each interaction charged with meaning, and forced both of us to communicate in subtle, nuanced ways. A fleeting touch, a shared smile, the softness of her laughter, these small gestures became profound statements in a world that could never fully witness them. In that quiet afternoon, I understood the delicate balance we were navigating, the line between desire and restraint, excitement and propriety, closeness and discretion. It was a dance we both knew how to perform, one that deepened our bond without ever needing to cross the limits of what the world deemed acceptable. And in that careful dance, the slow burn of our connection only grew stronger, more magnetic, and undeniably real. After days of shared moments, lingering glances, and unspoken tension, there came a quiet evening that shifted everything without a single word being said. We were sitting together on the porch, the sky painted in shades of amber and rose, the gentle hum of evening insects wrapping around us like a soft blanket. A breeze rustled the leaves, and the warm scent of her perfume mingled with the faint aroma of freshly cut grass. It was ordinary and extraordinary all at once, a moment poised perfectly between the mundane and the unforgettable. We had been laughing softly at nothing in particular, the kind of laughter that grows from comfort and familiarity rather than jokes. At one point, our hands brushed as we reached for the same mug of tea. Neither of us pulled away immediately. Instead, our fingers lingered together, a subtle acknowledgement of the bond that had been growing quietly between us. That brief contact said everything words never could, a promise of understanding, a recognition of shared emotion, and a gentle surrender to the intimacy that had been simmering beneath the surface. I watched her as she spoke softly about her day, her thoughts spilling freely, her voice calm yet imbued with warmth. Every nuance of her expression was magnified in that soft light, the way her eyes softened when she smiled, the faint crease of concentration on her brow when she recounted a small challenge, and the delicate tilt of her head that drew me in without conscious effort. There was a rhythm to her presence, a quiet magnetism that made the world outside our little porch seem distant, irrelevant. In that silence, I realized the depth of what we shared. We didn't need to name it, to define it, or to act on it publicly. There was a quiet power in simply existing in each other's presence, a slow, deliberate intimacy that thrummed in the pauses between words and the weight of our glances. Every accidental brush of her hand, every shared laugh, every fleeting touch of knees or elbows communicated volumes. It was more than attraction, it was recognition. Recognition of each other's vulnerabilities, the comfort of shared understanding, and the subtle thrill of being seen so completely without judgment. The unspoken rules of propriety and caution hovered nearby, yet they didn't diminish the warmth or the connection. In fact, they made every moment feel more precious, more delicate, and infinitely more meaningful. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the porch in soft shadows, I felt a profound sense of calm and exhilaration simultaneously. There was no need for words. In the brush of our hands, the shared smiles, and the quiet closeness, we had reached a silent understanding, an acknowledgement of desire, respect, and emotional intimacy that neither needed to be spoken aloud. The slow burn had reached its quiet peak, and it was perfect in its subtlety. The evening had settled into a quiet, comforting calm. We found ourselves sitting together on the edge of the porch, the sky now painted in deep shades of indigo, the first stars beginning to glimmer above. A gentle breeze carried the faint scent of flowers from the garden, mingling subtly with the warmth of her perfume, a scent I had come to recognize, to crave in the most understated way. The world outside seemed to fade, leaving only the soft rhythm of our shared presence. Our conversation had dwindled into a comfortable silence. There was no need for words, the space between us spoke volumes. Her hand found mine, resting lightly atop it, warm and steady. I didn't move away, I let my fingers curl slightly around hers, savoring the quiet intimacy. It wasn't a dramatic gesture, not a declaration, but a tender, deliberate acknowledgement of the connection we had nurtured so carefully. Every beat of her hand against mine seemed to echo the silent understanding that had grown between us over the past weeks. I glanced at her face, illuminated softly by the fading light. Her eyes held a gentle warmth, a calm vulnerability that mirrored my own feelings. A small smile played on her lips, not shy or nervous, but serene and knowing. In that look, I felt the culmination of every small touch, every lingering glance, every quiet conversation we had shared. The tension that had once electrified our encounters had transformed into something deeper, a comfortable, profound closeness that felt as natural as breathing. She leaned slightly closer, her shoulder brushing against mine, and I felt a surge of warmth in my chest. The proximity was familiar, safe, and exhilarating all at once. I could sense the steady beat of her heart, hear it in the quiet rhythm of the evening, and it grounded me in a way words never could. There was no need to speak of what this meant, the silent affirmation of our closeness was enough. We sat like that for a long time, watching the stars appear one by one. The night wrapped around us gently, shielding our little world from the outside eyes that had once been a source of hesitation. And in that quiet, shared space, I realized something essential: true connection didn't need public acknowledgement. It didn't need dramatic gestures or declarations. What mattered was the intimacy, the trust, the warmth, and the comfort of simply being near someone who understood you completely. As we finally rose to go inside, our hands still lightly touching, I felt a profound contentment. The slow burn journey of curiosity, hesitation, and emotional tension had arrived at a place of quiet fulfillment. The unspoken affection, the subtle glances, and the tender touches had all led to this, a moment of safe, deeply human intimacy that left both of us smiling, hearts light and minds at ease. The story didn't need to end with fireworks or confessions, it ended with the simple, perfect satisfaction of being seen, understood, and quietly cherished. If you enjoyed this slow burn story and the quiet tension of a forbidden connection, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. There's plenty more age gap romance and heartfelt stories waiting for you. Share your thoughts in the comments. Would you follow your heart, even if the world might not understand?